This episode is in memory of a beloved member of the Miami City Ballet family, Jennifer Conrad. Jen made an indelible mark on every person who had the pleasure of encountering her in their day with her easy smile and unwavering kindness. Those of us who were lucky enough to know and love her will remain enriched by her memory for all of our days. We will always love you, Jen.
I'm Rebecca King Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. On today's episode of Conversations on Dance, we are joined by Adam Weinert, Artistic Associate of the Kaatsbaan Cultural Park's annual festival held in Tivoli, New York. The festival runs 4 consecutive weekends, beginning Friday, September 13th. Adam takes us through his personal history with dance education and performing, how expanding his interest to include dance history and even gardening broadened his horizons, what it's like to work with a team at Kaatsbaan to develop and curate programming, and what audiences can expect to see at this year's festival. To purchase tickets, visit kaatsbaan.org. That's KAATSBAAN.org. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk to you about the wonderful work you're doing at Kaatsbaan. But since this is your first time on our show, we always go back to the beginning of one's personal history with dance. So we need to hear just a little bit about how you first fell in love with the art form and what your early exploration of it was.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Adam Weinert. I grew up in New York City and London. So I trained very early on at the School of American Ballet and the Royal Ballet School. And
Not too shabby.
and that gave me like a real deep kind of love and respect for classical dance because I was on stage, like Maria Karofsky was my stage mom and Damien Boetzel was my cavalier, and I was a drunk peasant boy next to Paloma Herrera, and
That's so cool.
it was pretty sweet. Actually, when I interviewed for this position at Kaatsbaan, I interviewed with Kevin McKenzie, who is the board chair and artistic advisor of Kaatsbaan, also the former artistic director of American Ballet Theater. And I reminded him that I premiered a role in his Nutcracker in 1992.
What role was that?
I was, mouse number 8 or something like that.
Baby mouse.
The original, though. The OG mouse number 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it made us both feel a little old, but I got the job, so
Gosh, I mean, the fact that you said former artistic director, I'm like, wait, he's not there. Even though we've interviewed Susan like 3 times already, but time just flies. Sometimes you feel like when you're young, like that just stays frozen in time forever. But from then, so you were at SAB and Royal Ballet School, and at what point did you decide that you wanted to make this a professional career, and what did that path look like for you?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. I did, even in those years, I didn't consider dance to be a career path. And so I left SAB, I went to an academic high school, I was an economics major at Vassar College, and then I spent a summer at Jacob's Pillow and got to learn repertory by Pina Bausch and Maggie Maran and Angeline Prejolkaj, and it just totally expanded my idea of what dance is and what dance could be, and I knew I had to do it. So I transferred to Juilliard, which is I think where I met you, Michael, for the first time.
It's so funny because you look exactly the same as when I used to see you across the plaza. RIP the plaza doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, I remember always seeing you there. Yeah, it's again frozen in time.
Oh, thank you. You too. And yes, that put me on a different course, and I danced with the Met Opera Ballet, Mark Morris, Shenway Dance Arts, a number of freelance contemporary gigs, and eventually started pursuing my own choreography and got very involved in kind of creative reconstructions of the works by Ted Shawn, the pioneering modern dance choreographer who founded Jacob's Pillow, and did a lot of works mostly in museum spaces around that, like at the Tate Modern and the Museum of Modern Art, and
Hmm.
uh, got into kind of the dance installation and dance film world a little bit. Um, I moved up to Hudson, New York, about 10 years ago, which is wild. I can't believe I've been here that long already. And have continued in that work and gotten involved in lots of different kinds of projects. And now here I am, the artistic associate at the Kaatsbaan Cultural Park, which for me is just a really beautiful way to weave together a lot of my passions. And not to mention, re-encounter some of these people from my youth, like Paloma Herrera, like Maria
Hmm.
Kurowski. I took class with Julie Kent yesterday because she was up here teaching for the Kaatsbaan Ballet Intensive. So it makes me feel like I'm in the right place.
Yeah, yeah. No, I want to dive into the sort of, I guess, the breadth of your artistic pursuits a little more because it's so fun to read your bio, and I'm just trying to like make little notes of everything you do. So I have like filmmaker, choreographer, researcher, dance reconstructor, and preservationist, and gardener. So I mean, so it kind of it does. And then when we get into Kaatsbaan and what's going on there every year, it makes total sense that someone like you who has like a hand in all these kind of different artistic pursuits would be able to and would want to lead the organization. But let's start a little bit with you first before Kaatsbaan. So I'm wondering, did college kind of help open your mind to these sorts of things, or was there a specific point where you started to be like, I guess, so ambitious in the scope of what you were doing?
Hmm. Yeah. You, I'd say at Juilliard, the most impactful piece of it were my classmates. And I just continue to be inspired by these intensely passionate, disciplined, goal-oriented people who are going on and doing very creative things. Um, there have definitely been some surprises, like growing up in New York City. I never expected to develop this passion for like growing food, for example.
Hmm.
And that turn really came about through Ted Shawn. When I was reconstructing his dances, you know, because there was no surviving members of his company, I had to put those works together from like Laban notation, memoir, rumor, like whatever I could get my hands
Hmm.
on. And I found that they did do several hours of farm work every day as part of their physical training practice and their creative process. And so I thought like, oh, I should
Same.
do some of that and just see what it's like. And I found it to be very impactful in terms of getting a sense of groundedness into my dancing, which was like the note I always got in college. And in kind of myriad ways, it was surprising to me how impactful that was. And it's also kind of interesting to look at how many dancers there are in a farming growing space. There are actually two former uh, one SAB student, one city ballet dancer in the farm business planning class I took at Tufts University in the pandemic. And I was like, what are you doing
Amazing.
here?
It's amazing.
There's something there. There is some kind of connectivity between the sort of sweat equity and I don't know. I'm struggling to find the language for it. That's sort of a project I'm working on. But I think it's really interesting. And I started a garden at Jacob's Pillow, which feeds the dancers who perform and train there. And when I got to Kaatsbaan and just saw, there are 150 acres of land there, it's very exciting to me to think about creative ways of using these resources. And the mountain stage at Kaatsbaan is just such a magical place to experience dance and to perform and yeah, an inspiring place to be.
Gosh, it just sounds like the perfect spot for you. I mean, we'll get more into it. But I'm curious about Ted Shawn. What is it that drew you to his work and made you want to dive deeper and learn these things and even do some of the things that he would do, like gardening?
Yeah. So as a young student at Jacob's Pillow, And as a male dancer, you do sort of feel a sort of affinity towards that work and that project. And I got really interested in his work in just the way that he was trying to talk to, everyday people. Like, he saw ballet as being this sort of bourgeois elitist thing. And he wanted to say, like, no, dance can be for everybody. Like, let's figure out what is American about American dance. And that was really his project, at least how I see it. And I think he really grew, what was considered dance and who and what could be put on stage. And I really respect him for that. It was kind of funny. So I was in graduate school and I was studying under Andre Lepecki. We were, Ted Shawn would often use the movement of labor as a way of trying to appeal to like the laboring class. And I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, I'd love to reconstruct one of these dances. And literally the next week, I got an email from the Museum of Modern Art saying, we got your email address from Andre Lepecki. We'd love for you to reconstruct the works of Ted Shawn for an exhibit.
So cool.
And then I get there, because this was for an exhibit called 20 Dancers of the 20th Century, where they were having kind of human interpreters of important choreographers of the 20th century. And I get there and they said, oh, we were expecting you to be much older. Like, I think they thought I was one of the men dancers from the 1930s.
That's
Oh,
good. You were
so
like,
good.
mm-mm.
But, it was too late to
Back out.
Yeah, so that happened. I found that really fascinating. And then I, later learned that Ted Shawn had bequeathed his works to the Museum of Modern Art, and that the museum had given them away to the New York Public Library when the New York Public Library opened in the 1960s. And I thought that was unfair. And it's actually against the policies of the museum to give away the works of a living artist. So that's when I created that augmented reality app to reinstall the works inside the museum, which I did without the museum's permission. And I've kind of been low-key banned from that place.
No. You were
anyway,
trying to right an artistic wrong, you were doing what was
that's
morally,
right.
Yeah.
And because it's only there digitally, they can't remove it. So it's a permanent exhibition at the museum, which is, kind of neat.
It is really cool. That's so funny. I love that.
I wanted to, can we talk about the gardening aspect for a little bit more?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so unique, but then like at first, I was very curious to hear about it. And then the second you start to talk about it, it makes so much sense. It sounds kind of meditative, which so many dancers have things that they do to like kind of put themselves in the zone. And then I also think it connects you, like it gives you a sense of gratitude. And so many people have ways of trying to ground themselves through gratitude in their art form too before you work. I just think it sounds like it makes really beautiful sense to how it would be married to your artistic day. Whereas like at first, when I first heard that, I was like, that seems cuckoo. What's going, and then it makes total sense.
Yeah, there were two things that were kind of uncanny. The farm that I started working at, it's this old farm. It's been in this family for 13 generations. So, they bought it from the Dutch. And they've started this project archiving work songs because they're really interested in the ways that a work song can synchronize movement and also create joy and increase productivity. So it was a great place to sort of riff some of these ideas about dance and farming. And I remember one day I said to my field manager, he was like, I was expecting farm work to be super repetitive. But here we come in and every day we do something totally different. And he said, well, it is repetitive. It just works on an annual cycle. And, as like this little boy from New York City, I felt like it really changed my sense of space and time, which are important mediums in dance, right? Like I remember Larry Rhodes at Juilliard, that's how he defined dance. It was the movement of bodies through space and time.
Mm.
It's a balancing thing too. He like,
Oh,
apparently he would, someone would ask, how what's this ballet about? And he might say like it's about space and time, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, it takes 16 minutes to move these dancers through space, or something like. I'm really paraphrasing here, but just like that. I love that that is similar idea
yeah,
amongst
yeah.
ideologies. So
And,
I want
um,
to let's switch over to Kaatsbaan now. Let's talk about how the opportunity came up to have this position. You already talked a little bit about the interview process, but we really want to dig in a little deeper if we could.
yeah, so Kaatsbaan was founded by four people closely associated with American Ballet Theater, including Kevin McKenzie, the former artistic director, and Martine Van Hamel, prima ballerina. Um, and for a long time, it was, you know, a residency and performance space focusing on dance, maybe particularly classical dance. About 5 years ago, new leadership came in. This was Sonia Kostic and Stella Abrera,
Mm-hmm.
really wanted to open up the kinds of works that Kaatsbaan presented and the kinds of artists that we supported. So they really grew the mission to include, music, film, theater, visual art, culinary art, like lots of kinds of things. Um, and and that was a very exciting time for the organization. The pandemic came in right in the middle of that, and I thought it was a really beautiful pivot to build this outdoor mountain stage, which is probably now what we're most known for, I'd say.
mhm.
Yeah.
And there was a moment when I believe we were the only people presenting dance in New York State because we could safely bubble dancers. We had this COVID-safe outdoor stage with lots of air and space to move around in. Um, and Sonia is now the executive director of the Brishnikov Arts
Mhm.
Center. And Stella Abrera moved on to the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School.
Mhm.
So that created two openings. And Trisha Reed came in as the managing director, and I came in as artistic associate. And Kevin McKenzie is still our artistic advisor and is very much, yeah, very much involved, which we love.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What is his? I was curious about that because that must be a nice thing for him to kind of continue doing. So what are his some of his responsibilities that he has with you guys still?
Yeah, I think it's been an evolving role, I'd say. I think it did take a little bit of time. Even after he stepped down from ABT, he was still very involved there. So we've
Mhm.
kind of seen his involvement at Kaatsbaan grow over the last 2 years, which I think has been lovely.
Yeah.
We have regular calls about programming. He's around a lot in the summer because he's also on faculty at the Kaatsbaan Ballet Intensive, um, and he's the chair of the board. So he's around a
That's
lot.
cool.
Mm.
That's so nice.
Yeah. We always talk about this because I think institutional memory is so important, and it's
Mhm.
so often ballet companies will find a new director who's never, actually had that experience. So it sounds like, especially with you coming in, you like for you to have a connection to someone who's just been there the whole time, must be massively helpful.
Absolutely. And his vision extends far into the future in terms
Mhm.
of his dreams for Kaatsbaan. So that's very exciting. It's a nice touchstone for everybody. I think that some organizations talk about like mission drift, which
Mhm.
when you stray from the original intention of the organization.
Mhm.
And I think there was some kind of concern about that when we grew the type of work that we present.
Right.
But Kevin really grounded it. I remember talking with him saying that to make a ballet, you need visual art, you need music, you need dramaturgy, you need stories. Like all of these things are related, feed one another, and so it only makes sense that we bring them all into this tent.
Right.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
What are some of your specific responsibilities in your role there?
Well, great. So I work on programming our festivals. and our residencies. We have several different kinds of residency programs through the year. And those two things I'd say are my primary responsibilities. We are a small team, so we all kind of have a hand in everything, as you may or may not be familiar with. uh, but it's a real pleasure, and we've shifted our festival format this year. We used to hold two 3-week festivals, and now we're doing one longer festival in the fall, with each week having a slightly different theme.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a new format for us. I'm really excited about it. I think it makes a lot of sense, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Can you take us through some of that? I'd love to hear. Each weekend I was wondering if there was a thematic tie, but then also is there an arc over the course of the festival that you're looking for audiences to experience?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. One, I'd say kind of overall theme of the festival is that they all deal with different kinds of storytelling. Like,
Mhm.
so there's memoir, there's self-portraiture, there is Wayne McGregor's piece Autobiography, there is a work based on the Odyssey. So they all deal with storytelling. They all deal with placing the self alongside history along these different mediums. So that's sort of one through line. The first week, we focus on film, literary, and visual art. So we actually kick off the festival with a film, Merce Misha Moore, which celebrates the decades of friendship and mutual admiration between Mikhail Baryshnikov and Merce Cunningham. Uh,
Cool.
yeah, we're very excited for that. Kind of the centerpiece of that is Daniel Madoff's film of Event at Red Cat, which Baryshnikov performed in 2010. But they also weave in lots of different archival footage, rare interviews. It's a fun film.
Mhm.
Uh, Next up is a reading of the new memoir by Francine Prose, which it's called 1972, and it explores a year in her life where also she was dating one of the men who leaked the Pentagon Papers. So it was a transformative year for her, but also for the country.
Mhm.
And then on the Sunday, we do an art walk with the curator exploring our 2024 visual arts exhibit, because we are a 153-acre campus, and we have a sculpture, an indoor and outdoor exhibition every year.
Mhm.
Cool.
Wow.
So much.
Yeah, it's so fun, and it seems to make so much sense for, like we've been saying, the breadth of your interests, like
Hmm.
how maybe you can take us a little bit deeper into your own like curation process. Like where do you even start? Are you starting with a theme? Is that something you brainstorm with other people?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of brainstorming and groupthink happening. I don't want to pretend like this was all my
Right.
all my brainchild.
Uh,
Sure.
And there was some evolution. I think um, we started with one thematic idea, and it sort of evolved to the place where it currently is, which I think was an organic kind of evolution. I will say my experience of it is this is the third festival now. It's like all up in the air until like it all locks
mhm.
into place.
Right,
Right.
right.
And there can be like a stressful few weeks, like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And then it lines up and it pans out. And you
Mhm.
may not get everything you want, but I'm very pleased with the way this has taken shape.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
How are some of the ways that you're looking for what you bring to the festival? Are you traveling around seeing different things? Talk us through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm definitely taking that train down to New York City to catch
Mhm.
performances. I'm also driving over to Jacob's Pillow to see what they're working on, not only in the summer festival, but also a lot of the winter residencies and other kinds of works in progress showings that they have. Uh,
Hmm.
there are also a lot of conversations with other programmers about what's interesting, who to look for. Uh, I did do APAP this year, which is always just a fun
Hmm.
way. If you catch the showcases or not, it's a great way just to kind of touch toes with people coming through New York City. Um,
Hmm.
one thing that was important to me this year was to highlight the fact that we are an incubator as well as a presenter, because I think that's
Hmm.
something that makes us stand out in the field. So we have one weekend which is dedicated to works which were built, at least in part, in residency at Kaatsbaan. Uh, so that was a way to, yeah, to kind of underscore that piece of what we're doing. And we have so many artists come through. More and more, we're holding what we're calling new work previews. So at the end of the residency, kind of an open studio showing of what's going on. And we found that our audience really likes that sense of getting an inside look at something, um, seeing it before the New York City folks get to see it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this new works bill, and it's all people that Rebecca and I have gotten the pleasure of interviewing. And so it's got Lamone on there, and then
Mm.
Omar Ramon de Jesus, who I've gotten to work with as a choreographer, assisting, and then music from the soul. It's like it's such a fun range within there, and yet I think that they all are also tied together in a harmonious way that will make sense. But I mean, how do you kind of decide that? I mean, maybe you wouldn't stick like chai pa in the middle of there, but what, like, for your personal taste, like, how do you
Yeah.
decide what's going to mesh well within the program?
Yeah, well, I like to always include one classical program
Mm.
in our festival at least. And this year, that is Company Wayne McGregor, which might be a bit of a stretch in terms of pure classicism, but it was just too good a get to miss. And we can come
Mhm.
back to Wayne McGregor. Um, I also always like to have one uh, legacy dance company
Mhm.
in our programming. I think the Limon Company looks so strong right now. I really wanted to get them in the program, and they were building this new work with Kayla Farish, who is a choreographer I really respect. It's an interesting project. They've given her access to two kind of lost works by Jose Limon from the 1950s, which she is reimagining in a way that only she can.
Mm.
And that seemed like a great project, and also in keeping with our overall theme to kind of look at history and place yourself in it. Um, I will say that that program for me began with Omar. I'm a big fan of Omar Ramon de Jesus. I think he's
Mhm.
so talented, and he developed this work like those Playground Kids at Midnight is what it's called, and
Uh-huh.
it's a duet that he performs with his ex-lover, and he brought it to Kaatsbaan last year while he was a fellow with our partnership with Baryshnikov Arts. It's called the
Mhm.
Baryshnikov Arts Fellowship at Kaatsbaan Cultural Park. And I saw this duet and I wanted to bring it back into
Mhm.
our festival. And then Music from the Soul came about in conversation with Works in Process because we wanted to see if we could cross-pollinate in some way, and that seemed like a nice fit. So this work will also go to the Works in Process season at the Guggenheim Museum after it's at Kaatsbaan, and I think it's going to be a great program. I think they all line up.
Yeah, we've really fallen in love with the Limon Company because we've gotten to see them now twice in Vail, and Dante Paleo, the artistic director, just seems like really driven by vision and like more maybe more importantly like love. Just as like seems to have boundless love for the art form and for Limon and but also for his dancers. So I love this idea of reimagining, not disposing of your history, even if it's gone, kind of. The idea of reimagining a work that is essentially lost, but having an artistic exploration there. Who maybe came up with that idea? Was that Kayla's idea, or was this something that others kind of brought up?
I I want to say it was Dante's
Mhm.
vision.
Mm.
I know that he has had a lot of ideas about how to operate as a legacy company.
Hmm.
Because you want to stay relevant and evolve, but you don't want to lose sight of the founders. And I think this is a really nice way of threading that needle.
Hmm.
Um, and it's, right up my alley because I'm a kind of a dance history nerd.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly. I love
Yeah.
that.
I mean, because we talked to Janet Elber about this too. This is something that she's been exploring for the Graham legacy as well. And it just
Mhm.
makes me jealous. I'm like, why are ballet people stingy about this? But that's a different podcast. I'll complain about that another day. But it just seems like something, it does feel like something we're less well, maybe we're just more uptight in general, but we're less open to exploring. And so I just really appreciate that idea. And it seems exciting and fun. Even if it doesn't work out, it was just an exploration. It's a lost work. So it's like, it's fun to try to find something that isn't there. And if it's still not there, that's also fine. You know, it's art. It doesn't need to be perfect every time.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on works in process at the Guggenheim for a second. We've heard a lot on our podcast about the work that they do there. Duke Dang is so wonderful. We love hearing always about the stuff that they're up to. And we do know we heard about the bubble residency. That must have been before your time because it was during COVID, but that happened at Kaatsbaan. So I'm wondering how you mentioned one way that you're partnering. Are there other ways coming up in the future within this festival that you're partnering with them?
That's the only way we're partnering with them currently, although
Currently?
we
Okay.
are often in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Because he, as you know, is partners at a lot of residency sites with different
Hmm.
projects, and the timing doesn't always work, or it's not
Hmm.
always the right fit. But we're in touch a lot. He's a neighbor up here, and we're friends. I'm a fan
Yeah.
of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Sure.
So cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I will mention like another partnership with this festival is in the first weekend, we're hosting a literary retreat, which runs parallel to the opening weekend of the festival. So, and presenting Francine Prose, that
Hmm.
author, ties
Right.
in
Hmm.
with this literary event. So we do look for partnerships, whenever possible, because I think that, well, that's what you need to do these days.
Yeah.
Totally. But it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a totally different venue than something in Manhattan in a, proscenium theater. It just can be like a totally different experience. So it makes sense to partner in those ways. I wonder if you have like an overarching, let's say like 5-year plan for Kaatsbaan. What are you looking towards in the future?
Hmm. Well, we have begun new kinds of residency offerings. So, like, for example, the bubble residency model that worked so well in the pandemic uh, isn't the right fit for everybody these days. And what I mean to say
Mhm.
is, like, we have 20 guest rooms, we have 3 studios.
Hmm.
So not every company needs 20 guest rooms, 3 studios, 2 outdoor stages. So one thing we're working on is, how do we support individual artists, smaller companies by creating these kind of cohort residencies, layering
Mm.
groups on top of one each other, which can also sometimes create a nice synergy, nice opportunities for collaboration. So that's one new initiative that we're fine tuning.
Mhm.
We do have this fellowship program with Birchenkopf Arts, which has produced some really stunning works and collaborations. So that's definitely part of our future ambition.
Mhm.
And for me, what I really love about our outdoor stage is I just think it makes such a strong case for seeing performance live in person all together.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Because that feeling that you get out in that field with the Catskill Mountain backdrop and like an eagle soaring above, like just you can't get that feeling streaming on your iPad on your
Right.
couch. I'm just speaking
Mhm.
for myself.
No, absolutely.
And so, the more that we can lean into that, I think will serve us and, to be frank, the performing arts overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it feels like these residencies too, and these opportunities to bring artists together to collaborate can also influence the art form. It can, change the direction that things are going in. I felt like when we did talk about those bubble residencies back during the pandemic, that played a huge role in what was coming out of the dance world at that time. So, continuing with that part of the legacy too, I can see as being very important. I mean, that's what we see it on social media that, so much is always happening there.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I haven't been working in New York City in a minute, but finding studio space in New York City was a challenge 10 years ago. I imagine it hasn't gotten
Oof.
easier.
No. I mean, I don't, luckily, I'm not the one doing this anymore, finding studios, but I do not envy those. I witness others struggling to make that happen. I mean, there are parts of the year, like, like last week of October, God bless anyone trying to find a theater or a studio to work in. It's not happening for you.
Yeah. And and the feedback that we get, the quality of the work that you create in, I don't want to say isolation, but in this rural environment just is qualitatively different.
Mhm.
Uh, and you're cooking together, you're eating together, you're having side conversations. You don't have to remove all the floor tape at the end of your 30 minutes. You can
Right.
uh, you can kind of settle in a different kind of way.
Hmm.
Right.
And
Yeah. I'm sure the location is absolutely inspirational for these artists. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I guess for our last question, I would like to hear a sort of high in the sky idea for you for Kaatsbaan. If you could have, $100 million, that might be too much. We'll limit it a little bit. No, but if you could have some exorbitant amount of funding to pursue a specific dream for the organization, what might that be?
hmm, that's a great question.
We love to ask this question, but sometimes it gets hard. It's like it's hard to even imagine having unlimited funding for an arts organization.
That's right. I mean, I oh geez. I think to the original vision that Kevin McKenzie laid out, in 1990, included a new theater building, a dining hall building, and two more dormitories. And
Mhm.
I don't sneeze at any of that.
Right.
um, when I look to Kaatsbaan, I just see so much potential.
Mhm.
We are so easy to get to. We have such beautiful land resources. I do see, uh, I see Glyndebourne, I see Vale, I see Jacob's Pillow. Like I see all of these things, and uh, we're getting there.
Hmm. And
Absolutely.
maybe can you tell us how to get to you since you're touting that seems like a pretty important thing. It's if it's accessible, I think that sometimes people might be, you know, they might have an idea that, okay, well, it's out of the city and, it might be hard to get to or something, but how do we get to you?
Yeah, well, you can drive. We're about an hour 40 north of New York City. There's also a train station in Rhinecliff, New York,
Hmm.
via the Amtrak. Quick, easy ride. And then we're about 10, 15 minutes from the station. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful trip right along the river.
I'm jealous. That sounds nice. And how do people get tickets for the festival?
That's great. So you can visit our website, which is www.kaatsbaan.org. That's KAATSBAAN.org. And yeah, tickets are on sale now. We have a lot of member benefits. If people become members of Kaatsbaan, you get discounts, free tickets. That information on that is available at memberships. And yeah, it's an exciting 4-week program, closing out with company Wayne McGregor, which will be a real opportunity to see those bodies on stage. One thing I really love about the outdoor mountain stage is that, the production level value is stripped down to kind of the bare essentials, and you really get to experience those bodies moving through space.
Mm-hmm.
And that company has some pretty impressive people on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love
Sounds
Wayne.
wonderful. Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And we hope that everyone who's listening and has access to a car from New York City or elsewhere or further away can come drive up to Kaatsbaan starting September 13th for successive weekends. So let's come out and support you guys. It sounds like such an incredible festival this year. So we're really glad we got to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Conversations on Dance is part of the ACAST Creator Network. For more information, visit conversationsondancepod.com.